Support for Conversations Live comes from the members of WPSU and from the Environmental Programming Endowment, the Gertrude J. Sant Endowment, and the James Olay Family Endowment.
Good evening and welcome to Conversations Live, Get Your Garden On. I'm Ann Danahy. It's spring, and that means after months of poring over seed catalogs and daydreaming about daffodils, gardening season is here. Tonight, two experts join us to share their tips for making this the best growing season ever. They'll also take your questions. Let's meet our guests. John Esslinger is a Penn State horticulture educator. He works with fruit and vegetable growers and in greenhouse production. His areas of expertise include fruit and vegetable production. Tom Ford is also a Penn State Extension horticulture educator. He works with commercial horticulture operations and growers. His areas of expertise include greenhouse and nursery production and fruit trees. You too can join tonight's conversation. Our toll-free number is 1-800-543-8242, and our email address is connect@wpsu.org. John and Tom, thank you both so much for coming in to talk with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Yeah.
We saw record-breaking precipitation in some parts of Pennsylvania last year and just some crazy weather patterns. And it seems like in some ways that's continuing into this year. We're already above average levels of rainfall in a lot of counties. What does that mean, John, for growers coming into this new growing season?
Well, last year was tough. I mean, a lot of people had maybe one of their worst gardening seasons ever. I'm like to say that this year is going to be better. You know, we're looking. Last year was a record, so hopefully this year won't be another record. But you know, there will be some lingering effects of last year's excessive rain, and so people should watch their plants, especially plants in low-lying areas. But as far as gardening, vegetable gardening, things like that, you know, I would encourage people to do what they normally do. You know, be optimistic.
So that lingering effect might be if there was too much rainfall and it could hurt trees and shrubs that were already planted from last year.
Yeah, perennial plants that were lived through last year in low areas, especially where downspouting is, things like that, that may show up as far as root rot and some issues this year.
And Tom, what are you telling people out there who are wondering, hey, all this rainfall, is this a good thing?
I don't usually tell them it's necessarily a good thing. It's good for people that are on private wells, but when you look at plant material, plants typically, when we have a dry year, they set their roots more deeply. And so if we have a couple of dry years in a row, then that root profile is a little bit lower to the ground. When we have wet conditions, those roots unfortunately start to suffocate. And so that can be pretty significant. So John's alluding to, like with rhododendrons, we deal with phytophthora root rot. We'll see a lot of ornamental cherries this year. They're going to bloom and then totally collapse. So it's going to be a frustrating year because gardeners are going to feel helpless. It's like a silent killer lurking up on them right now.
Oh gosh, so even if you think your rhododendron made it or your cherry tree made it, you might have to go in and take another look just to see how it's doing.
That's correct, and usually what happens is we see a record number of plant replacements in a year like this. So the key is be patient and see what's going to happen, and then if you have to replace something, make sure you don't go back in the same planting area. Make sure you move it away, and if you have a problem with wet soils, make sure that you plant it a little higher this time.
Okay, so try to address the problems before just repeating it. But as far as gardeners who are just getting ready for fruits and vegetables and herbs and that type of thing, is it time to get started?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there's a lot of things that you should already have started if you're going to start them from seed. There's other plants that if you're buying them from greenhouses, it's a little too early. So you know, kind of do what you normally do, know what the weather is around your area of the state. You know, a lot of things like with tomatoes, you know, there's plants that you can plant them out and maybe they don't get frosted, but they don't like that chilling, cold mornings kind of thing, and they won't do as well if they are exposed to that. So kind of be patient, know when the best time in your area is to plant. And, we do have master gardeners in each county, and they're a great resource to maybe call your county and say, hey, when is the best time in our county to plant tomatoes?
And now is a good time for some shrubs and trees, right, Tom? What can people start thinking about planting right now?
Really, as far as all the ornamentals go, the sooner you can get them planted, the better off you're going to be. We try to get them established before we have the onset of drier weather. So really, March, April, early May is prime time to get those trees and shrubs in.
Okay, so the next couple of weeks.
Perfect time. We start talking even some of the dormant herbaceous perennials. We'll see hostas that are sold. You'll see peony roots that are being sold. All those materials should be planted as soon as you can.
Well, one mistake that gardeners might make, and I know you have talked a little bit about this, is the dreaded mulch volcano. Tom, tell us about what that is and how to avoid it.
Over mulching has become, I guess, a major issue as far as in most ornamental landscapes. Typically, mulch is only supposed to be applied no more than 2 to 3 inches, and we're going to put this in quotation marks, accumulated mulch. What people do is they add 2 to 3 inches every year, and soon we have this volcano of mulch erupting from the soil. And then what happens is that creates issues for the plant material. It can cause something like collar rot. It can also cause surface rooting by the ornamental, and if they surface root, they produce stem girdling roots, and those stem girdling roots can actually choke and kill that tree.
Oh gosh, so even if you think you're helping your tree, nurturing it, you might be doing the opposite.
We kill more plants with kindness, and the really bad statistic that's out there is that 80% of plant mortalities in the landscape are due to people.
Oh wow. What about the fluctuating temperatures this time of year? It can be beautiful in the 70s during the day, and then it gets chilly at night. John, is that tough on plants? Is there anything you can do?
It's kind of normal for this time of the year. Most things can handle it. What we worry about is getting a frost on tree fruit. You know, peaches are starting to bloom around most of the state. A frost on those now would be devastating. So it depends on what you're planting, but most of our perennials can handle this kind of weather, and they do well in it.
It looks like we have a call from Jackie in Altoona. Jackie, what's your question?
Wild onions are taking over my yard. How do I get rid of them?
That's a great question. I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to. So she has wild onions taking over her yard. Tom, any thoughts?
Well, the herbicide that works the best is going to be 2,4-D. And there's several different brand names that you can work with. The key is that you want to go ahead and apply it as soon as possible. It works better when the weather is a little bit on the cooler side, because 2,4-D also has the propensity to drift off site when the weather's warm and damage non-target plant material. So if she's got wild onions and garlic and she applies a 2,4-D product on a warm day like today, there's the possibility it goes off as a gas and could damage John's tomatoes.
Oh gosh. One thing that I understand is not a good idea is to try to pull it up. Is that one way you could actually spread the onions?
If you pull it up and leave little bulblets in the ground, yes, they can spread, but you could physically remove it from the property.
But you do want to get the bulb, so maybe use a little digging tool to get the bulbs up when you're pulling it.
Okay, so hopefully that helps, Jackie. You either want to target it, or if you decide to try to dig it up, make sure you dig up the whole thing. And so you have a peach tree example for us, John. What can you tell us about fruit trees this time of year and what we should be looking for? What makes them healthy?
Okay, what I wanted to show people is if you look at that stem, there's a lot of blossoms. So you can see each one of these is going to be a blossom that's going to make a peach. And what we recommend is about 1 peach for every 8 inches of stem. So this stem should only have at the most 3 peaches on it, but you can see there's a lot of blossoms there. And so I want to remind people to take the time to remove some of these when the peaches are small. And I'm talking like when they're nickel to quarter size. Just go through and remove them, and remove, say like on this limb, leave 3 nice peaches. And that's going to allow them to get nice size. It'll keep them nice and spaced out apart, so you'll have less disease. And it's just better for the tree. What you want is nice peaches, not tons of real small fruit. Yeah.
Right, because I can see that you'd want the desire to leave it on so you get lots of peaches.
Yeah, but it won't make nice peaches. And I try to encourage people to think of it this way: is the tree is collecting the sun and making sugars, and so if it has to spread that flavor over a lot of peaches, then those peaches aren't going to taste as good. So to get really nice tasting, high quality peaches, space them out and go for quality. The other thing that happens when you get a limb like this and it's got 50 15 or 20 peaches on it, it ends up breaking.
Okay.
And so when you see broken limbs, it's because people didn't take the time to thin. And you will leave a lot of peaches on the ground. So when you pull those off and you do that every 8 inches, you're going to take off more than what you're going to leave on.
So you don't want a drooping peach tree. Does the same idea apply to other fruit trees, so apples?
Yes, apples should be thinned also. The things that we don't worry too much about is cherries. Plums, it's maybe not quite as important, but they should be thinned also.
And has this rainy weather actually been good for the fruit trees?
It's not good for the trees. We do worry about diseases, and as things start to bloom, that's when the disease season kind of gets started. So if you're going to spray your trees, you want to be careful. You don't want to put anything on that's going to hurt the bees. But if you can put a fungicide on during bloom to protect them, and that'll help keep some of the diseases that'll develop later in the summer away.
And we have another call. We have a call from Lawrence in State College. Hi, Lawrence. What's your question?
Thank you for taking my call. Yes, we have a number of rhododendrons around our home. They've been there for, a good 20 years. And what's happening is a number of them, and it's sort of random among them, where the leaves are turning brown and shriveling up. We drove around our neighborhood, and we've noticed that throughout the neighborhood, the same thing is happening in sort of clusters where the shriveling is taking place. And my questions are, what is causing this? And second is, how should I deal with it?
That's a great question because rhododendrons are beautiful and they usually thrive a lot in this area. Tom, any thoughts about that?
Usually the disease that causes the biggest problem for us in rhododendrons is Phytophthora root rot. Phytophthora root rot is classified as a water mold. And so it's actually, the spore actually has a flagella on it, so it can actually move in free water. And so the problem is we had such heavy rainfall, and if we're in a very heavy soiled area, then the tendency is you're going to cause some root rot issues. There's 2 things we want to do. Before we move forward, rip stuff out, we want to go ahead and get the issue diagnosed. Penn State has a plant disease clinic. And if the individual could submit not just a branch showing the damage, but we actually could use a small portion of the root system. Take some roots from the worst looking plant. If you go online, Penn State Plant Disease Clinic, you can download the submission form, send the roots in, send the growth in. Sarah May at the lab will look at it, she'll culture it out, and the report will be sent right back to the property owner. There's no cost for that. And then what we can find out then is if the lab report shows that it is indeed Phytophthora root rot, then unfortunately the death bell is tolling. Now, the ones that have not shown injury, we may be able to use fungicides to protect them. But the ones that are infected, we probably will not be able to save.
Oh gosh, but before giving up hope, get it tested, make sure you know what you're dealing with.
That's correct. And the problem is, if it is Phytophthora, if you dig that plant out, then what will occur is if you put another rhododendron in, or a yew in, or an azalea in, or a Japanese Andromeda, they'll pick that organism back up from the soil, and we'll see the same fate repeated again.
Oh gosh, so could this have been an effect of all the rainy weather that we were talking about earlier?
Most definitely.
Okay, so hopefully get it tested. Hopefully that's not the problem and it'll be okay, but you might have to replace it sounds like. And we have another call. We have a call from Dave in Phillipsburg. And we'll wait just a moment before we get that in. Before we talk to that person, John, can you tell us a little bit about tomato growing? So tomatoes are super popular and it's not yet time to plant them, but what's the best approach for planting tomatoes?
I brought a couple samples. I just wanted to show people what a nice tomato plant looks like and what you're really looking for. Is you want a tomato with nice color. You want to make sure that there's no leaf spots or yellowing of these leaves, especially the older leaves. A lot of times the cotyledon leaves or the seed leaves should be nice and green and healthy. And this one, the one got knocked off, but you want something, and that's kind of a sign of a nice healthy plant. Another sign is a nice thick stem. It stores carbohydrates in that stem, and that's going to help it as you transplant it, put it out in your garden. I've got one that's not quite so nice, and this was a plant. It looked nice. It was grown indoors under a light. And then on a nice, bright, sunny day, it was put outside. And it actually, you can't see very well, but the original leaves they just dried up and died and burned right off. And so think about that. You know, it's kind of like us being inside for the wintertime. We're not used to being out in the sun. So you don't want to go out and put on a bathing suit and be out in the sun all day. You want to kind of gradually condition yourself to the sun. The same thing with plants. And so it is important to take a plant, even if you're buying a plant that you know was grown in a greenhouse and has never been outside, it's not a bad idea to let it for part of a day, be exposed to the wind, exposed to the full sun, condition it a little bit before you plant it.
Okay, so don't give your tomato a sunburn.
Yes.
You're right.
Yes.
So I always heard that Memorial Day was kind of the cutoff day. That's when you could start planting tomatoes, and it would be a good idea. That there wasn't any benefit until doing it earlier. But then part of you're the gardener, you have your tomatoes, you have your other plants, and you want to get them in. Where do you both come down on this? Is it better to wait until we are in that really warm season?
Yeah, tomatoes can be hurt, even though we worry about them getting frosted. Even if they're not frosted, if the temperatures are in the 40s, they can get chilling, and that will actually reduce the yield or yield potential of that plant. And so, yeah, it's wise to wait a little bit. If you're only putting one planting of tomatoes in, that Memorial Day weekend for most of the state is a good time.
Okay. Tom, you agree?
Yeah, I agree. The only other thing is, the thing about with tomatoes is that when the temperatures drop below typically about 65 degrees, then you get a phenomenon that occurs, we call it cat facing. So the blossoms will have a little bit of deformity, and then when you actually have the fruit will actually be very deformed.
Oh, gosh.
And as we say, it looks like a pucker on a cat. And that tomato is really almost worthless to us. So really let the weather warm up. You're not going to lose anything by even going to June 15th and getting tomatoes in.
Okay, patience.
Patience is a virtue.
Remember that. Okay, so we have a call from Dave in Phillipsburg. Dave, what's your question? Dave, can you hear us?
Yes.
Hi, Dave. What's your question?
I've had blight on my tomatoes for several years in Phillipsburg, Pennsylvania, and it's like I get great growing plants. They look good. They start producing, and then they just go to heck.
Yeah, Dave, I think we can relate to that. A lot of people can. That's a great question. Tom, what can be done for tomato blight?
Well, essentially, anytime you plant tomatoes or potatoes, as soon as you have green foliage outdoors, you need to start protecting them with fungicides. You can't let them go a week or two. You can't really wait until the disease shows up. Late blight likes the weather cool, moist. So you think about most springs, we have a cool, moist period. We have had crops damaged by June 7th, June 10th of some years. So it can be significant. It can cause total yield loss. So it's really critical that you protect those plants as soon as they go in the ground.
And we have some pictures here for people of what to look for tomato blight, right? And John, do you have any advice for people when they're dealing with that?
There's two different blights that we worry about, and that's early blight and late blight. Early blight is here pretty much every year. It's kind of a local. It does help some things you can do, cultural things, moving your plants around so you're not planting them always in the same spot. If you can stake them and sucker them, pull off those suckers, kind of open the plant up so it's not quite so dense. Tom mentioned the fungicides make a big difference, and there's a lot of different ones. Some are considered organic, some are not. But yeah, spraying them does make a difference. And with my garden, I don't do a lot of spraying, but I do spray them early before the fruit's on. And then I don't need to worry about, okay, is there residue on the fruit? If I can spray them a few times, I usually can keep them healthy enough to get a good crop.
Okay, so a little TLC for the tomatoes, and hopefully that'll help out. One other question related to that. So if you've had that blight, is it safe to plant the tomatoes in that same spot, or do you have to kind of move them around?
It's good to move them around if it's early blight. Late blight, it doesn't make any difference. Yeah, late blight blows in, and it comes in through the air. And so if you planted there last year or not, it doesn't make any difference.
Okay, all right, some great advice. And we have a call from Tracy in Altoona. Tracy, what is your question?
Hi. I'm calling to see if there's anything I can do to prevent the Japanese beetles from wiping out my raspberry and blackberry bushes. I'm cognizant of the pollinators, and I try to do as much organic as I can, so I don't want to do anything too harsh, but the Japanese beetles just, they seem to target the berry bushes.
That's a great question. Any advice for what she can do to deal with the Japanese beetles?
Yes, something that'll help a little bit. I mean, if you want to use something that's organic, attack the Japanese beetles while they're in your lawn. You know, milky spore is something that works fairly well. As far as the adults, you know, the key to controlling the adults is being aggressive once you see the very first adult. The Japanese beetles put out an aggregation pheromone, so that basically says, we found good food, come and get it, and all their friends come along. And so if you go after the very first ones you see, you're going to help minimize the population. But and there are some organic sprays that are fairly good on, not great on Japanese beetles. You know, Pyganic is probably your better one.
Okay, so if you don't want to go with the harsher pesticide route.
Mm-hmm. Right, and the other organics that you can use to target the grubs while they're in the ground, there are beneficial nematodes. Beneficial nematodes will target, like we call Leyden star larvae. So it's really hard to do it this time of year, but when we get into that August, September period, she could take beneficial nematodes, apply them to the soil. They'll seek out the white grubs and basically kill the white grubs. So that's a good companion with milky spore. The problem is that Japanese beetles and milky spore work real well. But if she has Asiatic garden beetles or northern mass Schaefer or one of the other scarab beetles, milky spore doesn't work on them.
Oh gosh, is this something she could go to a master gardener with and get a little bit of advice about which route to go?
Most definitely. And there is one companion plant that's in the literature. I have not tried it myself, but there's a companion plant that we call rue, R-U-E. It's typically considered an herb, but rue supposedly repels Japanese beetles. So people that believe in interplanting may plant some rue along the brambles to repel the Japanese beetles.
Okay, so a couple different options there. Hopefully that helps out. And it looks like we have an email from Richard in Phillipsburg. And Richard wants to know, I have a row of blue spruce trees I planted in the 70s that I depended on for a nice windbreak. Just this year, they seem to be dying from the bottom up. Is it a disease or what could cause this? Is there any way to protect the ones that are remaining? Tom, any thoughts on that?
Well, this is real critical for him to really jump in right away. We're looking at a couple different diseases. Rhizospira needlecast and Stigmina needlecast are the two needlecasts that we have seen probably most significantly in our corridor. Wet conditions promote infection, and so every piece of damage that he observes, that plant was damaged last year. It was infected last spring. What he needs to do now is to apply protective fungicides, typically at bud break, okay, or when some people say when the growth is 1.5 inches long. But typically you're looking at 3 to 4 sprays. I like to go at bud break. Some people can go a little later, but 3 to 4 sprays, and you have to make sure you're applying something broad spectrum containing like chlorothalonil, which goes with name trade names like Daconil and Funganil, and there's other trade names as well. But that material is critical to protecting the spruce. If you can get the fungicide on and protect the new growth, you should be able to beat the disease for this year.
Okay.
And the plant should recover.
All right, well, that's some good news, Richard. Hopefully that helps out. And I have one more tomato question before we move on. When you're buying a tomato plant, you're not growing it from seed yourself, but let's say you're going to go out and buy one. What's the best one to pick out? Because I know I've gone and some of them look about like this, sort of small and nice, but then you also see the ones that are big and they've already got the fruit on them.
Yeah, I'd be careful with the big, I mean, a plant that's already starting to fruit, and if it's in a small container, then it's going to be stunted. So what we're looking for is something like this plant. I mean, this plant is not starting to bloom yet. It won't be long till there'll be bloom in there, but it's not started yet. And this plant, if you took that plant, put it in your garden under warm soil and warm weather, it'll just take right off and go. A plant that's more mature and has fruit on it, you think, well, I'm going to get fruit ahead of everybody else. If you want to do that with 1 or 2 plants, that's fine. But as far as really getting a nice yield, nice fruit, start with a younger plant.
Okay, so again, patience pays off when it comes to planting tomatoes. All right, good to know. And Dave from Phillipsburg is giving us a call back. Dave, hi, how are you? What's your follow-up? Hi, Dave.
Yeah, I guess I'm dealing with more of the late blight.
Okay, so the late blight issue.
Yeah, is there anything that can be done with that? Because
Yeah, when you're dealing with late blight, the key is we have to protect the plants as soon as they go in the ground. Normally, we'll go with a 7-day spray schedule, and we've got a host of materials. The way we work with commercial growers have better tools than the home gardeners do. So for home gardeners, we have to use mainly what we call protectant fungicides. They're products that have to stay on the foliage to protect the plant. So we can use mancozeb, we can use chlorothalonil, we can use a fixed copper. Fixed coppers usually are what organic growers would utilize. But we try to do a rotation of those products during periods when the weather is cool and moist. When we get warm and dry, late blight's not as active. So we can stretch the spray schedule out a little bit. But then early blight shows up, and septoria leaf spot, and some of the other diseases. But late blight's the one organism that will kill the crop. Late blight is what caused the Irish potato famine. So it's got a great significance from a historical perspective. And we go back some years ago, we had, I won't say Armageddon, but we lost a lot of tomato plants up and down the East Coast due to a late blight epidemic.
Right, right.
So the key, though, is protecting with fungicides. And if you're going to go organically, there's some other organic products out there. There are some biostimulants that will hopefully thicken the cell walls that may lessen infection. There are some natural bacteria that we can apply. The Bacillus subtilis, the literature has some effect, but the problem with some of the organic materials is they have to spray so frequently that you'd almost have to spray some of these products almost daily to be able to get the benefit. That's why we look at traditional fungicides. For commercial growers, what we'll do is we'll have them use the cheaper protectants early, and when we get the first positive late blight in a county, then typically we have the growers then switch to more systemic products, which unfortunately homeowners can't get a hold of.
Okay, so hopefully that will help Dave out, some different options for taking care of that blight that he's seeing. If you're just joining us, I'm Ann Danahy, and this is Conversations Live, Get Your Garden On WPSU. Joining us tonight are Penn State Extension horticulture educators Tom Ford and John Esslinger. Our toll-free number is 1-800-543-8242, and our panel is ready to take your calls. You can also send us questions by email at connect@wpsu.org. So while we're waiting for a few more questions to come in, Tom, you have some advice for people when they're planting either flowers or shrubs, anything that you buy and it's potted, and how is the best way to go about doing that when you buy either potted flowers or a potted shrub? What should you do next?
Well, most of the plant material we purchase typically is in a round container today. And if we don't disturb that circular root pattern, it's worse on a woody ornamental than it's going to be on, say, herbaceous materials like marigolds or geraniums or something like that. But a woody material, once those roots stay in that circular pattern, they can become girdling over time and actually kill that plant material. And it's not a quick kill. 10 years down the road, that beautiful mugo pine you plant in the backyard all of a sudden dies, or at least all of a sudden to you. And it's usually because of those stem girdling roots, because of that circular root pattern. So what we usually tell people to do is make sure you have a serrated knife. I like to have either a serrated survival knife with the nice, really sharp teeth,
Okay.
or there's also soil knives with that's serrated blade as well. But I like to just take that serrated knife and I cut it from the top of the ball to the bottom. And I make those cuts about 1 inch apart and go from the top of the ball to the bottom of the ball until I ring the whole ball. And then when I'm planting it, typically I look at the ball, and if I have largely pine bark in the ball, then I want to use pine bark typically as my amendment. And then when I plant, it's always good to plant it a little higher. We usually say 1/6 of the ball above grade. Backfill down from the ball, but no soil on top of the ball. Okay. Because we put heavy clay soil on the top of the ball, it's like trying to grow something at the bottom of a swimming pool.
Okay, so when you were talking about cutting the root ball, are you actually talking about cutting the different roots that might be in there?
That's correct. So if my hand was the root system, we'll do it this way. We'll take that blade, and we'll cut it down. It's about probably about 3/4 of an inch or so into the ball itself, and we'll just basically sort of strike it down the ball. And what we're trying to do is disrupt that circular pattern.
Okay, so that's not going to damage the roots long term?
No, what actually happen is you'll get good root regeneration that way.
Okay.
Okay. When you see a shrub that is wilting and dying in the landscape, often you pull it up and the roots all look intact. You can actually see the imprint of the container in it. That's usually a planting disaster.
Okay, so just what we're looking at on the screen, we've got a root ball, and if you think like, oh, this looks nice and healthy, and I'm just going to plunk it in the soil, that's exactly what you don't want to do.
That's exactly. This landscape photo here, they had 80% of the material, several $1,000s worth of landscaping that was done by a professional, which made it even worse. And the landscape was declining, the landscape was dying, and you could go out there and pull the plants up like you're harvesting carrots because none of the root balls had been scored, and the soils were also very heavy and wet as well.
Okay, so even if it doesn't seem intuitive, you want to shake up the root a little bit and loosen it up.
That's correct.
And I imagine the same is true when we're talking about fruit trees too.
The fruit trees often, they don't come with soil. Some will, you buy some that are potted, but often what they do is they'll take a bare root plant, put it in soil, and then sell it to you like that. So yeah, they've not been growing in that container for very long. And so typically we don't need to worry about that. We do want to try to make sure we keep Tom mentioned about keeping them up. A lot of times we want to just bury them and bury that root system. We don't want to do that with fruit trees. Try to keep it up. And the other thing is a lot of our trees are grafted. And if you look closely, you'll see where the graft union is. That graft union has to be out of the soil. We say at least the width of your hand out of the soil, because when you put a tree in and as that soil settles, the tree itself kind of settles down. And if the top part of that tree touches the soil at all, it will root there, and then you'll end up with a standard tree. So it'll no longer be a dwarf or semi-dwarf tree.
Okay, so you should know what you're getting too. You should know if you have one of these grafted specialized trees or if it's just a regular tree.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, that's great to know. And we have a couple of calls. We have a call from Denny in northern Cambria County. Hi, Denny, you're on the line. What's your question?
Yes. Is it okay to plant marigolds around your garden, and will that really keep insects away from your vegetable plants?
Great question, Denny. So marigolds, yes or no?
I use them. Actually, I have some growing right now. It'll help a little bit. I mean, the marigold, the odor from them is offensive to some of the insects. Does it mean you're not going to have insects in your garden? No. That you're still going to have insect pests, but it probably helps a little bit. The other thing is marigolds are wonderful. They're tough, they're beautiful, they're a nice addition to any garden.
So go for the marigolds.
Yes.
We have another call from Marcus in State College. Hi, Marcus, what's your question?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Marcus.
Hey, my question is, this year we're doing raised garden beds, and so we live in State College Township, and we were hoping to just buy compost directly from the university. Is there any other soil amendments that we have to do or consider, or can we just use straight compost from the university?
Great question. So raised garden beds, that's a real trend that we're seeing. A lot of people are doing it, and when you're filling it up, can you just go with compost, John, or should you have other things too?
I would not. I would try to get some nice topsoil to mix with that. Straight compost by itself, it'll cause some issues. It'll tend to stay wet. And as that breaks down, it's going to change the composition of your bed a lot. To have that compost mixed in with some nice soil, maybe 3/4 soil, 1/4 compost would make for a nice bed and be productive. Yeah.
Okay. Is there any risk of over fertilizing if you're just going with just compost?
Yes. Yeah. Everything, there's a balance, and you want to try to keep the nutrients in a balance and not excessive. If you've ever grown tomatoes or peppers and they just grow all plant and very little fruit, then you overdid the fertilizer. And so you want to try to keep things in balance, and too much compost or too much manure will take that out of balance.
Okay, great question. And we also have another question coming from Sue in State College. Hi, Sue. What's your question?
Oh, hi. About every 3 years, I have the university do a soil test on my vegetable garden soil. And probably the last 5 years, it shows a high, above optimum amount of calcium and also above optimum in magnesium. What am I doing wrong? What should I do? They don't want me to put anything on but just some urea because of the pH level, but that's about it.
Okay, Sue, what is,
Can
maybe
we
it's
ask
not
Sue a question?
Yeah, sure. Sue,
Sue, have you been putting lime on?
No. Oh, no.
Okay. The other thing is your water may be high, have a high pH, and if you've been...
Well, this is at Tudick Park Garden.
So Tudick
And
Park
it says at the bottom of my thing, the high calcium level in this sample indicates the probable presence of soluble calcium. But I don't know what that means, really. Where is the calcium coming from since I don't lime it?
It can come from your water source. We see with some public water supplies where calcium can be 160 to 200 parts per million. And so every time you do water, it's getting a dose of limestone. And so I guess you could say municipal water systems like to have a higher pH water, because if you have older homes that have lead, they don't want the lead to become soluble with acidification and then create some lead issues. So a lot of times they don't mind that the pH is higher or the alkalinity is higher, but it does create issues for your garden. So what you typically have to look at is you don't want to worry too much about the calcium magnesium levels. You're not going to apply any additional lime. What a bigger issue may be what your pH is, because if the pH is also high, then you may need to add some garden sulfur to lower the pH, because the pH gets so high, then it ties up some of the micronutrients, and micronutrient availability. You'll see things like zinc deficiency and manganese deficiency and iron deficiency, all because the pH is too high. So a little bit of garden sulfur may help. Not much you can do with the calcium and magnesium levels, but they may also cause potassium not to be taken up by the plant as regularly either.
Okay, so hopefully that helps you. It might not be anything that you're doing wrong. You just need to take a few steps there. And we have another call. We have a call from Holly in Altoona. Hi, Holly. You're on the line.
Hey. Hello there.
Hi, what's your question?
Okay, I have a question about lavender. I've been landscaping my property the last few years, and I've terraced the front bank. Top terrace is Asiatic lilies and black something or blue something. At any rate, the middle terrace is all lavender. Then the bank is periwinkle, and then the bottom terrace is lavender again. Now, the top terrace lavender I think it's called Lavendula phenomenal or something. I had maybe, 8 or 10 of those, and they did great the first year that I put them in, and they did great the second year. But the third year, like 2 weeks before spring, they all turned brown.
Oh.
I took one to, the Extension service in Bedford, I believe, and they checked for root rot or something, and it wasn't that. Okay, the bottom tier, I got them from Bluestone Perennials. I put them in. First year they were great. The second year, last year, they were tremendous. And now, just about a week ago, they all turned brown.
Oh, gosh,
what am
Holly.
I doing wrong?
I don't think you're doing anything wrong. I think you probably do have a pathogen there that's causing problems. The issue is that depending on the quality of the sample going into the office, and then you want to make sure that they're sending the sample to the plant disease clinic at Penn State again so that they can culture it out. If it's a fungal pathogen, we need a good root system of a plant that is not completely dead. If it's completely dead or the roots are not intact, they may not be able to detect anything. So in some cases, it's sample related. We have to have a quality sample to get a quality result, and that may be the issue. If it comes back with a pathogen, you may not be able to grow lavender. So there may need to be some other things that need to take place, but there are also some biological products that may help a little bit. There's a natural fungi called Trichoderma harzianum. Okay, it's a mouthful, but what it does is that it can stimulate a plant's immune system, and you can actually inoculate the soil before you plant again, and it may actually help get that plant established and help it resist disease. But before I spend any more money, I want to get an accurate diagnosis.
So hopefully that helps Holly get it tested, and that might give you an answer. Or if not, try some of those items that Tom recommended that I'm not going to try to repeat the names of. Good luck, Holly. And it looks like we have another call from Ted in Pine Grove Mills. Hi, Ted. Are you still there? Okay, we've lost Ted. We're going to go to Susan in Boalsburg and see if Susan is with us. Hi, Susan.
Hi. I have a question about my kale and Swiss chard.
Okay.
I have so many bugs on my kale and Swiss chard, and I don't know what to do with it. I guess it's cabbage worms, but help me, please.
They're nodding here. John, what do you think she's got?
Yeah, she probably has the imported cabbage worm. They like my kale too. Yeah, there are some. They're not hard to kill. The problem is that they're persistent, and so for pretty much the second half of the summer on, you've got to be out there quite often. There are some like BT products that are organic and safe that work on it. Spinosad, Captain Jack's dead bug is another product that works well, and those will control it. But like I said, you'll see them quite often, and the first sign you'll see is you'll see it's a kind of attractive white moth kind of fluttering above anything in that cole crop family, and know that, okay, they're out there, they're mating, laying eggs, and soon you're going to start seeing the worms, so it will be time to start. They're pretty much the same color as your plants, and so they're really hard to try to visually see them and pick them off is kind of a tough situation.
Okay, so try to take a close look at it and see what you can do. All right, we've got a question from Mike, and Mike writes, is it too late to prune fruit trees and hardwoods? I'm late getting started. Also, what about evergreens? John, any thoughts on that pruning?
Tree fruit, if you've not pruned them, it's not the perfect time to do it, but it's a whole lot better than not doing it at all. So yes, get out there, hopefully you've got the next couple days off, get out there and get that pruning done. We really like to see you remove that pruning from the areas of your trees, your little orchard, whatever you have. But yes, get that pruning done. I hate to say it, but it's almost better to prune it imperfectly than not prune it at all.
When is the best time for pruning?
If I had to say the best time, it'd be March.
Okay, so March, early, it still feels like winter, but you want to get out there and do your pruning.
Yeah, you don't want to, sometimes if you get a nice warm spell in the middle of the winter, that is the worst time. Okay, you can actually damage the tree by doing that. When you prune it, it actually makes the tree a little more sensitive to winter injury, and so we don't recommend pruning, during those warm spells. If we have a nice, consistently cold winter, February you can get started. A lot of my commercial growers tend to start, mid-February and try to get it done by now.
Okay, all right, great.
And one thing I did want to add, it's safe to prune apples, pears during that February, March timeframe. The stone fruit, especially peaches and nectarines, we don't like you to prune them until tax day. So the middle of April is you want to see some growth. You can see on this branch that I brought in, you see the flower buds, but between the flower buds, you see the little leaves starting to come out. Actually, some of my growers are still pruning their peaches. So even at this point, they're still pruning. But a peach tree, you want it actively growing when you start to prune.
So you can be a little late on your peaches, but not late on your taxes. That's our takeaway from that. Tom, what were you going to say?
In respect to the hardwoods, it depends on the species, but when we look at oak trees in particular, they're more susceptible to oak wilt when pruned in the spring. So typically with most hardwoods, we would prefer pretty much that November, December, January, that's the ideal time for me to prune. When you're dealing with evergreens, a lot depends on which evergreen we're talking about. If we're dealing with spruce and Douglas fir, they're a little bit more forgiving. A lot of times with pines, we're letting the new candles emerge, the new growth emerge, and then we're pruning it as that new growth emerges a little bit or after it fully expands a little bit. So it really depends on the species, but it can be devastating to oak trees if you're pruning them in the spring because of oak wilt.
Okay, great to know. And we have another question from Ted in Pine Grove Mills. Hi, Ted. What's your question? Hi, Ted. Hi, Ted. If you could turn your television down.
I'm interested in what is the growing season of evergreen trees.
Evergreen trees. What's the best time to plant them and grow them? Is there a good time to plant evergreen trees?
Well, it's pretty much spring. Typically March, April, May is when, if you're dealing with young seedlings, the young seedlings being pulled from beds. If you're dealing with mature trees, as soon as they are dug and start showing up in nurseries, you want to plant them. The earlier the better as far as getting conifers established. You can plant them in the fall, but I would rather, in most cases, spring, especially if it's an exposed windy site.
While we're on the topic of trees, this might be a good time to talk a little bit about the woolly adelgid, and that can hit hemlock trees. How do you know what to look for and what to do about it, Tom?
Yes, with hemlock woolly adelgid, if you have a hemlock in the backyard, look for like cottony egg masses, typically on the foliage. The adelgid is related to aphids. So they have piercing, sucking mouthparts, and they're basically pulling fluids out of that tree, which will stunt, stress, and eventually kill that tree. And so it's very critical, if you notice the adelgid, you have to look at some type of treatment. So typically we would use imidacloprid as a soil drench around the base of the tree, but you have to be careful because the neonicotinoids, again, will impact pollinators. So if you have a lot of flowering shrubs and trees around there, that's a problem. If there's water nearby, you typically can't use imidacloprid. The other thing is, if you have an 80-foot tall tree, you may also use a product that we commonly refer to as Safari. There's other trade names for it as well, but it's usually used as a bark spray. And that'll go into the tree, and within 3 weeks' time, so it'll already start working and killing the adelgids.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really beautiful tree. Do you recommend planting them at all, John, or is it something that people now avoid?
I think they're a nice tree, but be prepared. Watch them closely. Especially if a tree is not in its ideal growing conditions, a little bit stressed, seems like the adelgids are really attracted to those trees. If that's a situation, be prepared, like Tom said, to protect it. And it's unfortunate, but there's not an easier or safer way to do it. That is the most effective, and it will work.
Okay, good to know.
There's one more thing. Don't hang a bird feeder in your hemlock or feed the birds by your hemlock. Because what happens is the adelgids are sticky, and that's how birds introduce them to your property. They pick them up from an infested tree, and if you feed the birds, I've had clients where they're the only property in the block that's got hemlock woolly adelgids, and they have the bird feeder hanging next to the hemlocks.
I think I need to move my bird feeder.
Yeah.
I think this is some good advice. Okay, we have a call from Carrie in Greensburg. Hi, Carrie. You're on the air. What's your question? Okay, I think we lost Carrie. Are you there? No, I think we've lost Carrie. While we're waiting to see if she can call back, another creature that can be difficult for trees is the spotted lanternfly. What are we seeing in Pennsylvania, and is it hitting this area yet, John?
It's not in our area yet. We want to be very diligent to make sure it doesn't get here. When you talk to people that are in the area that is infested, it's a nightmare for homeowners. The insect is fairly large, and I have a friend that lives down there, and they said when you're walking in your yard, you're stepping on them, and so you feel the crunch, and it's just, and they produce a lot of, we call it honeydew. That's just a nice way of saying their manure, and that is actually, people say it's almost like it's raining. It's that bad. That honeydew will then get on things. A sooty mold will then grow in the honeydew, and so that makes things very, very unattractive. The crops, from a horticultural standpoint, they're devastating to ornamentals, to a lot of different ornamentals. But from the fruit end of it, we're concerned about grapes and tree fruit. And they do like those two different trees.
And we're talking about identifying them. You said they're pretty big. What are we looking at here? The egg sacs?
Yeah, those are the egg masses, and the females lay those late summer, early fall, September, early October, and lays them in a line like that, then covers them with that grayish, kind of looks like putty kind of thing. The adult, or excuse me, they'll overwinter that way, and then they'll hatch out, and there'll be a small black and white spotted. Some people will kind of say they look like a tick. They're that small when they first come out. The picture that we're now showing is the last instar where they actually have that orange.
Okay.
That is what the picture that's showing now is what they normally look like when in the first 3 instars.
And how big do they end up?
The adults are about 1 inch long, and so they're fairly large, and often when they get into an area, there's huge populations. You know, we talked about the Japanese beetle putting out pheromones for aggregation. They do the same thing, and so when you have an area that's infested, it's heavily infested.
Okay, so parts of Pennsylvania are seeing this, and if you see that, should you call the extension educator right away, or what's the best step?
You should know whether or not your county is in the quarantine zone, and that is the counties that are primarily in the southeast. Furthest west, I believe, is Dauphin County, Lancaster and Dauphin, those areas. If you're in a county that it's not known to be in and you find it, yes, call your extension, Penn State actually has on their website, has a number that you can call and you can report it. Somebody either from Extension or Department of Agriculture will come out and verify it. And then they'll talk to you about what you need to do about it.
Okay.
But we're trying very hard to keep it from spreading.
Right, okay, hopefully we won't have to deal with that, but we might. And we have a call from Carrie in Greensburg. Hi, Carrie, are you on the line? Hi, Carrie, are you on the line?
Yes, hi, Carrie. I'm Carrie.
Thanks for calling. What's your question? Hi, do you have a question, Carrie?
Yes, I do. We have a rhododendron plant that we've had for about 15 or 20 years, and each spring it really comes out, and it's so pretty, and the flowers they're just abundant. Well, this year I noticed that there was one area which is completely dead, and it's in the middle of the plant, and I was just wondering what happened, and if there's anything that we can do to prevent it from happening again and spreading, or would it spread to the rest of the tree? The rest of the tree seems very green, and the buds are coming out. They haven't they haven't blossomed yet.
Yeah.
But anyways, they are coming. I'm wondering exactly what to do.
That's a great question, Carrie. Tom, did we talk about this a little bit earlier?
We talked earlier about Phytophthora root rot. That's one of the things we want to consider, especially with the wetter than normal year in 2018. We've seen a lot of rhododendron suffering, but there are other things too that can hit rhododendron. There's actually rhododendron borer, which is a clear wing moth, and the actual caterpillar in this case will girdle the rhododendron and will kill the branch above it. So it could be rhododendron borer. There's also a canker called Bottispiria canker that also hits rhododendron. So the key is, again, getting it diagnosed. We have the extension office in Greensburg. So the first thing is, I'm not going to ask you to dig up some of the roots like I would with some folks, since you're looking at one section. What I would probably do is try to cut out that dead section and to take that to the extension office to see if they can detect anything on that. See if there's any indication of rhododendron borer or Bottispiria canker. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hedge my bets a little bit. I'm going to encourage you to treat it like it's Phytophthora root rot. And so the way I would probably approach that, we talked about Trichoderma harzianum. It's a plant, it's a product, root shield, plant shield, there's other names for it as well. And maybe use something like that. There are also phosphorus acid materials, which are fungicides that are available. I believe Elude is one, and that can also be applied. The product Aliette is also effective with Phytophthora, as well as Subdue Max. Now, they're all expensive, and that's why we usually like to go the diagnosis approach first. But in the cases, if it's a very large rhododendron, that you probably would have a hard time replacing, I may be more aggressive with that than something that had been just planted a few years.
Okay, so some great advice, and just a minute left here, but one question about the lawn. We haven't talked about much of that. If you're looking out at your lawn and it looks like it needs some help, is this a good time to get some seeds in, or when's the best time to take care of your lawn, John?
This is a great time to overseed, even a little bit before now. We're unfortunately they're calling for some heavy rains, and that those heavy rains, as long as it doesn't move the seed away, can actually help to kind of incorporate the seed a little bit, get it off to a good start. Cool weather is when the grass seed wants to get started. Don't wait until it gets warm. So now's the time.
The only caveat is if you put a crabgrass pre-emergent on, do not seed your lawn.
Yeah.
You'll wipe out your grass seed.
Okay, some great advice. John and Tom, thank you so much for coming in and talking with us. Our guests tonight have been Extension educators John Esslinger and Tom Ford. I'm Ann Danahy. For all of us here at WPSU, thanks for joining us and best wishes for a happy gardening season. Yeah.